Welcome back to Kids Corner here. I'm Jonathan Kidd along with Jeff Dulac. It's been a couple weeks, but we are back.
We are back, and football season is just around the corner. Practices start on Monday, and it's just a couple days away.
Kids Corner is brought to you by Hungry Howie's Dough Raiser. Go to doughraiser.com for more details. Diversified Members Credit Union, the official credit union of the Detroit Lions. Before we really get going here, which schools start at midnight?
The only one that I'm aware of as of right now is Walled Lake Central. We're planning on making our trip out on Monday to a couple of different midnight practices, but the only one I'm aware of right now is Walled Lake Central. That's a team that's done it for a matter of years now. They've got to be getting close to 7 or 8 years now. It seems like there's 5 or 6 new schools that do it every year, but it doesn't really seem like there are a whole lot that really consistently do it year after year after year. You know, you're talking about some of these schools around the state. Some of the coaches don't want to be burdened with trying to get up at midnight to go and do a football practice, and then a lot of them have families and they have to get their families up at 6 a.m. I'm a big fan of it because for a lot of people who played high school football, growing up, that night before football practice, one way or another, these kids can't sleep. They're excited, and why wait? And I think that's what a lot of these coaching staffs think, and I know that's the way the Walled Lake Central coaching staff thinks, and they're just ready to get at it.
And you're going to be starting our Snapchat filter that day.
Yeah, if you follow State Champs Net on Snapchat, all season long, really, we're going to have all of the best, content on Snapchat. So we're going to be out at a lot of practices, promoting the teams and our coverage, and you're really going to get more of an inside look at, the things that we do behind the scenes, not only in studio here, but out at games and places that we are and covering, and 24/7 is the kind of coverage we want to bring, and Snapchat's going to allow us to do that, and it really reaches out to the high school students much better than some of the other social media streams that we've already got.
Well, follow us on Snapchat at State Champs Net. So camp starts on Monday, so we're going to talk about the 5 storylines going into camp.
Mm-hmm.
Let's start with Detroit Catholic Central and Brother Rice. 2 new head coaches this year. Dan Anderson replaces Tom Mack.
Yep.
Adam Korzeniewski replaces Dave Safran.
The hires themselves make a lot of sense. Dan Anderson has been on Tom Mack's staff for a long time. He's not a whole lot's going to change with the mentality and the direction of that program. You will see some changes, obviously, with like you see with any new coaching staff. But Catholic Central is going to be able to pick up right where they left off. From a year ago, they were at Ford Field, and I think the continuity is important for the Shamrocks because this is a team that I believe will make another deep run into the playoffs. It's going to help having the same coaching staff intact with Dan Anderson now leading the way for the Shamrocks, and I think that it's going to help because you're going to have a lot of players who aren't, they don't have to adjust to a new coach and a new style and an entirely new coaching staff. You have Dan Anderson who's going to be in there, bring the same type of leadership and the same type of message that Tom Mack always had. Catholic Central is going to pick up right where they left off with Dan Anderson. I expect a big year out of the Shamrocks. With Brother Rice, I think I can speak for the both of us. We were pretty surprised when we saw that Dave Safran was let go at the end of the year. Adam Korzeniewski comes in. He was a former defensive coordinator, I believe, under Al Fracassa. In my opinion, there's not going to be a huge change for the Brother Rice football team this fall. Since Adam Korzeniewski had coached under Al Fracassa, there's not going to be a massive change into the direction and the message that's sent through the Brother Rice program, especially the way that it's been for such a long time. But there will be a little bit of a learning curve for Korzeniewski and the team. But I think because of the roots that Korzeniewski has, being a Brother Rice guy, I think it's going to be very similar to what Catholic Central has. They're going to be able to pick up relatively quickly. And then you look at a Brother Rice team who's made a lot of strides the last couple of years, improvements, and they made the playoffs last year. And I think they're going to be able to take that next step forward under Korzeniewski. And this is a team that's got a lot of returners from last year's team, so I think it's going to be a relatively smooth transition for both teams. But I know you and I have both talked about this. It's going to be very strange seeing that Brother Rice Catholic Central rivalry, and you look over at one sideline, there's no Al Fracassa, and you look back across at the other, there's no Tom Mack. That's going to be a very strange sight.
And Dave Safran now works at Detroit Catholic Central. Do you expect him to be on the sidelines when football season starts, or is he going to take a role at the school and that's it?
To be honest, I don't really know. You look at Dave Safran, he's a guy that is, obviously football's been a big part of his life for a long time. Being Al Fracasa's top assistant for all those years, being the head coach at Brother Rice the last 3 years, it wouldn't surprise me if Dave Sofrin has some type of role with the Catholic Central football team. He took the job working in admissions at Catholic Central, so he might be content with just taking that and maybe taking a year or two off from football. You don't really know. At some point, you have to expect that Dave Sofrin, whether it's at Catholic Central or anywhere else, really, I kind of assume he'll be back in the coaching ranks in football.
Number 2, who do you think is going to be the favorites going into the season, and who do you think is going to be your dark horses?
That's kind of tough when you look at it because football practice hasn't even started. Obviously teams have done their camps and stuff, but we don't really know. I look at a team like Cass Tech. I know it's kind of the easy answer to throw out there, but Cass Tech has to be the favorite for me in Division I. I know they lost a lot of talent off of last year's team. When you look at it, they have a lot of transfers coming in to kind of fill the shoes of those top-tier players that left. You got a guy like Brandon Gray who's going to come in and play receiver, and they've obviously got a deep receiving core. But the biggest thing that makes me think that Cass Tech can be that legitimate contender once again this year is the quarterback position. Every question mark for a team that loses a senior quarterback like Cass Tech did with Rodney Hall last year is, well, who's going to be running the offense? For Cass Tech is a guy that has plenty of experience in Aaron Jackson. Rodney Hall's gotten hurt; he's been banged up in the past, and Aaron Jackson has stepped in and filled in pretty darn well when you look at his body of work. He's going to step in as the senior leader this year. He's committed to Eastern Michigan. And I think he's going to be that guy that really kind of paces that Cass Tech offense and is that calming force that most teams don't have after losing a senior quarterback. That's why I think Cass Tech is got to be one of, if not the favorites in Division I.
Do you think the addition of Lou Arthur Nichols in that running game, you think he's going to be that main guy, or is there going to be a running back by committee again this year?
For me, I think the main guy for that Cass Tech offense, at least running the ball, is going to be Jaron Mangum. He's a 2019 running back who's got a lot of offers, but having Lou Arthur Nichols in that backfield is going to be a nice change of pace. It's going to keep defenses on their heels. So I think that there's two good things about Lou Arthur Nichols, who came over from Southfield A&T and joined Cass Tech, is you're not going to put too much of a workload on Mangum. You're going to be able to split the carries and do things like that. But then you have two dynamite talents out of the backfield. You won't have to put a whole lot on Aaron Jackson's shoulders, throwing the ball too much or making too many plays with his feet. You have two running backs that are capable of doing that. You don't have to put too much on Mangum or Nichols. They're going to split carries, and I think they're going to really kind of wear down defenses as games go on. Having two running backs is a big deal.
Besides Cass Tech, do you see like a Utica Eisenhower, a Saline being a favorite? Obviously, you said earlier that Catholic Central could be one of the contenders. Who do you think in Division I can challenge Cass Tech?
You look at a team like Catholic Central, they lost to Cass Tech in the finals. They come back this year, that big offensive line that we've all become used to knowing and seeing the way that they block, whether it's pass protection or in the running game. That offensive line is going to be anchored by a guy like Nick Carey, who's been there and done that for a couple of years at Catholic Central. Then they also got a guy like Isaac Darkangelo, who I think is going to be an impact player on both offense and defense for the Shamrocks. I really think Catholic Central is, again, going to be a contender in Division I.
And with CC, who's going to be their starting quarterback this year? Theo Day was a couple years ago. Now he's at Divine Child.
Right.
Austin Brown was last year's starting quarterback. Now he's at Madison Heights Madison. Who's going to be the next guy in line? It's going to be the third starting quarterback in the last 3 years for Detroit Catholic Central.
I think it's going, who we don't really know, first and foremost. We can speculate on who it may be. That's a Catholic Central program that back when it was Austin Brown and Theo Day battling it out for the starting quarterback job a few years ago, we had no idea who's going to start on day one. And I really don't think we're going to know until that kickoff takes place and we see the Catholic Central offense run out onto the field. The guy that I think a lot of us thought was going to get the start in the state championship game last year after Austin Brown went down with a broken leg against Romeo, I believe, in the semifinals, a kid named Marco Genrich, who was essentially the backup for most of the year. I think he's going to be a junior this year, so I think that's going to be their guy. In the state finals, Catholic Central decided to go with a senior, somebody who's a little bit more experienced than Genrich, but I think he's a guy that could be the next guy up for the Shamrocks. And then I just wanted to name one other, favorite, I think, in Division I. You had made mention of him, and I think it's Utica Eisenhower. Last year was a very special year for Eisenhower. They were pretty close to beating Cass Tech and making it to fourth.
It only took an amazing catch by Donovan Peoples-Jones.
Right. Yeah. Right.
If he didn't make that catch, then obviously Ike would have been in the final against CC.
Right. So it just shows you what a magical year that was for Eisenhower, because that Cass Tech team was picked by almost everybody to win the state championship from the start of the season. They had a couple of bumps, once against Saline and the other against Utica Eisenhower. And I think Eisenhower has what it takes to get back there, at least to that point this year. They got a quarterback like Max Whitwer, he's a winner. There's not a whole lot more you can say about a guy than just he wins football games. He was the starter at some point in his sophomore season, and he took Eisenhower big run throughout the rest of the regular season and into the playoffs. Last year, obviously, he led them into the semifinals. Eisenhower's going to have to replace some key players from last year's team, but I think with Max Whitwer, under center, I think that's going to be a calming force for Eisenhower. See if they can maybe make another run, for a second straight year, maybe back to the semifinals, perhaps further. I'm not really sure. You mentioned Saline. They're probably more of a dark horse at this point, but one thing you can't forget about Saline is, they've turned into a program that's next man up. It's not, we make a run and then we'll be back in a couple of years. That's a team that's known for just, bringing in the next guy who's going to do a really good job. You look like Josh Jackson, who was playing quarterback, went on to Virginia Tech. Zach Schwarzenberger steps in, and, they look like a team that hasn't missed a beat.
Mm-hmm. We talked before we got on the mic here,
Mm-hmm.
and the dark horses, everyone thinks that it's going to be West Bloomfield as that dark horse.
Yeah, I tend to agree with that. I look at West Bloomfield as a team that, how many teams are really going to be able to compete with them offensively? You have a kid like Bryce Veasley, a Division I quarterback that's going to Bowling Green, and then you look at his weapons. Weapon A and Weapon B are two wide receivers that are going to Wisconsin. A.J. Abbott, a wide receiver who transferred over from Northville, and then Taj Mustafa, who's also going to Wisconsin. Those are two big-time targets that not a whole lot of teams can say, yeah, we have two Big Ten receivers and another Division I quarterback. So I think West Bloomfield's going to be able to score with just about anybody. And a big test for West Bloomfield is going to be in Week 1 when they take on Walled Lake Western. I think
and with some transfers there, too.
Yeah, Walled Lake Western has some transfers there, too.
Only a couple.
Right. It's kind of strange to say it, but if West Bloomfield's the dark horse in Division I, even though Walled Lake Western was in the finals last year and lost to Detroit King, Walled Lake Western might be a dark horse in Division II. Quarterback like Sam Johnson and offensive lineman like Spencer Brown. Those are guys who can really take over what was already a really talented team and maybe, help Walled Lake Western to make another deep run. This is a team that is no stranger to making deep runs in the playoffs, and now that they have a guy like Sam Johnson, the Division I quarterback, and Spencer Brown, who just committed to Michigan State to play on the offensive line, Walled Lake Western is capable of making a run in the playoffs.
If Walled Lake Western does beat West Bloomfield at the PKC, they have a good chance to go undefeated during the regular season.
Yeah, I think so. You look at Walled Lake Western's schedule, and it's hard not to think that West Bloomfield is going to be their toughest game. The Warriors have kind of proven they're the class of the KLAA over the last couple of years, and it's a big challenge for Walled Lake Western and equally a big challenge for West Bloomfield. But whoever wins that game is really going to set themselves up nicely for the rest of the season.
We're really talking about Division I because obviously we're based out here in Southeast Michigan, so we know a lot more about the Southeast Michigan teams.
Right.
I do feel in the Flint area you might see a Davison be a dark horse too.
Right. I look at a team like Davison, you kind of think to yourself, last year they had such a great regular season and, they stumbled a little bit in the playoffs. But let's not forget that was the best team that Davison has had in quite a while. So that experience from last year, the success that they had, the loss that they had to Clarkson that ended their season, I think that's going to prove to be an important moment in time for Davison if this year's team is going to make a run. See how much they're able to rebound from that, how much they're able to improve from last season, and we'll really see what Davison is made out of this year. Obviously they're led by Tariq Reed, who was a Mr. Football candidate last year. He was bottled up a little bit in that loss how much does Davison get better? We will see, but Kyle Zimmerman, is going to have that team ready to go come opening week, and I really think that Davison is a team that's capable of making a run. Obviously, it's a tough path. Obviously Clarkson's going to be a team that stands in their way. We will see. But I think that Davison's a team that's always improving, and I don't expect that improvement to just stop now that they had one of their best seasons in recent history.
Let's talk about how the players buy into his program.
Yeah, you look at what Coach Zimmerman has accomplished both at Notre Dame Prep. This is a team that is very motivated every time they're out on the field. Coach Zimmerman and the rest of his coaching staff do a great job of motivating these players and getting them ready on a week in, week out basis. And this year will be last year was proof of it, and I'm sure we'll see it again this year. I don't doubt that. From our dealings and interactions with Coach Zimmerman at Notre Dame Prep and now at Davison, he is a player's coach, and I think that anybody that's played for him will tell you that. And I think he's going to have Davison ready to go again this year.
Who do you see as other dark horses?
One team that it seems like every time we have high expectations for Southfield A&T, they come up a little bit short. And whenever we're down on Southfield A&T, they tend to surprise us. So I wouldn't be surprised to see Southfield A&T make a little bit of a run this year. John Darby, who filled in at quarterback for Sam Johnson when he went down last year, I think he's got the experience under his belt to make a difference this year. Eric McCarn, who's a running back for Southfield. This is going to be a team to keep an eye on just because Coach Conley does a really good job of coaching his guys up, and I think this is going to be a year where they surprise some people when not a whole lot of people expect it, because they lost quite a few players to transfer, whether it was to Walled Lake Western where Sam Johnson went, or if it's Cass Tech where Brandon Gray and Lou Arthur Nichols went. He does a good job of coaching his players up, and I don't think the transfers will impact this team as much as some people would believe. And then another team that I think is a dark horse, obviously not Division I, but another dark horse team I like is Oak Park. You look at Oak Park, and this is a team that has two big offensive linemen in Justin Rogers and Marquand McCall. I think McCall is committed to Kentucky. I think Rogers is a highly recruited offensive lineman out of the class of 2019. Those are two big linchpins to have on an offensive line. These are two big building blocks to have on your offensive line, and I think that's going to really help Oak Park this year. And they have a quarterback that a lot has been expected out of. He was committed to Iowa State. He's reopened his recruiting. Dwan Mathis, I think, is ready for a breakout year. I think Oak Park has a really big year in front of them this year.
We're going to take a quick break, and we'll be right back here on Kids Corner.
Fundraising should be fresh, flavorful, and simple. We have the perfect solution at Hungry Howie's, Dough Raiser. Your team or school can sell paper pizza certificates that can be redeemed for one medium pizza at participating locations.
Hungry Howie's makes it easy. It's just a little mini pizza box, but we make lots of money, lots of dough.
Go to doughraiser.com to learn more and sign up. Your next fundraiser comes with flavored crust.
At Diversified Members Credit Union, we serve the entire state of Michigan with over 30,000 fee-free ATMs. We're with you wherever you go, to buy that new car, to take that dream vacation, to build that living room you've always wanted. Find out why so many people are choosing to own their own money by switching to a credit union. Apply today and become a member of the official credit union of the Detroit Lions. Visit us or click on dmcu.com.
Welcome back to Kids Corner here on the State Champs Podcast Network. Kids Corner is brought to you by Hungry Howie's Dough Raiser. Go to doughraiser.com for more details. And Diversified Members Credit Union, the official credit union of the Detroit Lions. We're going to continue our storylines heading into high school football practice that starts on Monday in the state of Michigan. We're going to touch on recruiting for a few minutes. Spencer Brown, his first two seasons, he was at Walled Lake Northern. Mm-hmm. Now he's at Walled Lake Western. Yep. He committed on Monday, and he's going to where?
Michigan State. Spencer Brown is a big offensive lineman. I think a lot of people didn't expect his recruitment to blow up like it has in the last 6 months or so, I would say. At the end of his sophomore season, I think a lot of people still believe that Spencer Brown's future was as a defensive lineman. He had made a lot of noise at Walled Lake Northern along the defensive line, and I think now he's going into his junior year, and I think now we're looking at a case where he's an offensive lineman. I've been told that Michigan State wants him to play offensive line, wants him to play more of it, get more acclimated with the position. But I think a lot of people expected him to get these Big Ten offers like a Michigan State offer, 3-4 months from now at the end of his junior season. But Michigan State jumped at the chance to offer him, and Spencer Brown's made it known that he's a bit of a Michigan State fan, and he was ready to jump on that offer. And I think with Spencer Brown now at Walled Lake Western, we're going to see just what kind of offensive lineman he is at the high school level. Obviously, having made his name as a defensive lineman for a little bit, I'm interested to see how he improves as an offensive lineman, over the next 4 months and then into a senior year in 2018.
We talked earlier about Brandon Gray.
Mm-hmm.
He was at Southfield A&T. Now he's at Cass Tech.
Yep.
He's now committed to Washington State, so he's going to head out west.
Yeah.
Way west.
Yeah. Not often do you hear, a school like Washington State being able to come into the Midwest and get big-time playmaker like Brandon Gray. But he's going out to play at Washington State. For those of you who don't know, Mike Leach, the former Texas Tech coach, is the coach at Washington State. They like to throw the ball, so I would assume that Brandon Gray's going out there because he wants to get some big-time stats and, pad those numbers, because Mike Leach likes throwing the ball 60-plus times a game. So that means that as long as he puts in the necessary work, which he will, he's going to be a guy that's going to see a lot of targets, in his time at Washington State. He's a 6'5" receiver, has great hands, has great body control, can out-leap, opposing defensive backs. He's going to be a good get for Washington State, and I think he's going to fit that system really well.
So, Jeff, what's going on over at Rochester Adams?
Rochester Adams has one of the most under-the-radar defensive backs in the entire state of Michigan, named Vincent Gray. I think he's a player who's ready for a breakout year, and people are going to really know who Vincent Gray is at the end of this year. But Vincent Gray committed to Missouri a couple weeks ago, and I think that's a really good get for Missouri. And I think it just shows you that Vincent Gray's going to an SEC school. He's an SEC caliber player, and we're going to see a kid that's going to have a big year on the defensive side of the ball. I think he hasn't gotten enough of the attention that he deserves to this point. But don't forget about him, because he's a big-time playmaker. He's going to be a guy that's going to make a lot of noise in the OAA this year. And I wouldn't be surprised to see him make an impact on the offensive side of the ball either, but he is a defensive back that's going to Missouri, and I think we're going to find out a lot more about him as this year goes on.
All right, and our final storyline here on Kids Corner, John Harrington is just 5 wins away of tying Al Fracassa, and then obviously if he wins 6 games this year, he breaks the all-time coaching record in MHSA history. Do you think he's going to do it this year?
I think so. You look at Harrison as a program. That's a school that, they're just built for the playoffs. They're built to make the playoffs. They're built to make runs. While Harrison is said to be closing within the next couple of years, I still don't think that they're down enough to the point where they're not going to make the playoffs. So I do expect them to make the playoffs, and I think that's what's going to be the most entertaining part about the season as Harrington's chasing down that record, because it's pretty simple. If Harrison makes the playoffs, John Harrington breaks the record. If Harrison misses the playoffs, John Harrington has to wait another year to get that record.
They could still get in at 5 wins if they're
Right.
playoff points, so they can still win it. If they only win 5 games, they can still get in and win a playoff game and break the
Right.
record there.
Which I think is what makes the whole, chase of Al Fracassa's wins record kind of exciting about it, because let's say Harrison makes the playoffs with 5 wins. Everybody's going to keep their eye on that playoff game, because how fitting would it be for John Harrington, where he's had so much success in the playoffs, to break that record in the playoffs? But for certain that John Harrington wants that record before the end of the regular season to ensure a spot in the playoffs, just because 6 wins isn't automatic into the playoffs. So it'll be very interesting. You talk about John Harrington, Tom Mack, Al Fracassa. These are the guys. These are the best coaches of our era of covering high school football. And now we're watching Al Fracassa, who's been retired for a couple of years, and John Harrington, Alfred Casa has been retired for a couple of years. Tom Mack just retired before the start of this year. And John Harrington, I'm not sure how many years he plans on coaching, or how many more years he plans on coaching. He's still chasing down that record. And it's been fun to watch, 3 legends. That's what these guys are. We've done 2 shows, one on Alfred Casa, one on Tom Mack for our Legends series. John Harrington is a legend just as much as either of those 2 coaches. And it's just been fun to watch. And regardless of coaching record, coaching wins, whatever that is, all 3 coaches are tremendous coaches. They've accomplished tremendous things with each of their schools. And more than anything, they're great people and great mentors for these high school football players and high school students that they've been able to teach and coach over the last several decades. And
also, too, you can also put George Port up there, too.
Look at George Port, and he's been, a huge figure for St. Mary's, not just in football. He coached basketball. He's coached other sports. And you look at, I don't think George Port's close to the coaching record, or the wins record in football, but with all the state championships he's won at St. Mary's, with all of the things that he's accomplished as the head football coach for the Eaglets, if we're talking about, a Mount Rushmore of high school football coaches, I think the 4 that we just named, George Port, Alfred Casa, John Harrington, Tom Mack, those are the 4 that go on that Mount Rushmore. But what I'm very interested to see is going forward is, we've had all these legendary coaches. Who are the next coaches to kind of, be in that legendary status? And I think we're quite a few years away from seeing another coach that reaches that type of status. Probably maybe more than a decade from seeing it.
Yeah, because I noticed, we started state champs in 2002, and I'm starting to see some of these coaches that have been at the same school for a very long time. You had Tim Beckler, who's been at Canton for a good 15 years, Mike Sadepsky, Thomas Wilcher, Noel Dean, Ralph Munger.
Yep. These are all
Terry Hesbrook.
Yeah, that little town in Ithaca sometimes gets forgotten, but he's been a tremendous coach out at Ithaca, and they've had a tremendous football program for the last 10 years. You see the coaches that, like Tom Mack and Alfred Casa, that are retired. You look at the coaches like George Port and John Harrington, who are legends that are still coaching. And then you look at some of those names that you just listed off, and these are definitely guys that are next in that next kind of wave of coaches that could be considered to have that legendary status. You said Thomas Wilcher. He's done great things at Cass Tech over the last 20 some years, right? And you look at Noel Dean's done great things at Lowell, and Ralph Munger's done great things at Rockford, and Mike Sadepsky's done great things at Walled Lake Western, and Terry Hesbrook's done great things at Ithaca. It's just something to keep an eye on and watch, because these are coaches that have been with these schools for a very long time.
And let's not forget Kurt Richardson over at Clarkson.
Right, yeah, Kurt Richardson over at Clarkson. That's another really good one. And these are all guys that have meant so much to not only the football programs, but the communities and the schools themselves. That's kind of what's been fun for me to watch, because we kind of get to know these coaches on a more personal level than just they're a football coach. And these coaches, they love coaching the game of football. They love coaching these high school kids. They love being a part of these communities and making a difference in their communities and in these people's lives. And that's been the fun part to see. And that's kind of what's exciting when you watch Alfred Casa get his coaching record. And that's also what's exciting now that you see John Harrington, who's now chasing down that record for himself. It's fun to see the longevity and the importance it is to not only the coaches, but to the schools and the communities associated with those schools.
Well, that's it for Kids Corner on the State Champs Podcast Network. Kids Corner is brought to you by Hungry Howie's Dough Raiser. Go to doughraiser.com for more details. And Diversified Members Credit Union, the official credit union of the Detroit Lions. I'm Jonathan Kidd along with Jeff Dulac, and we'll talk to you soon right before the season starts.